Morning, David. I
Good
guess it's
morning.
afternoon for you. How are you?
It is. We're good. How are you doing?
Good. So, do you remember? You played high school football, high level, and you were down there, I think, in Phoenix, if I remember right. And do you remember the first time as an athlete you were introduced to, like a regular coach strength and conditioning program? Was that in high school football, like in spring football, or were you guys back when they just still use universal machines? You're so old.
A little bit of both. We had, obviously the universal machine, but we had our high school was a little unique in the sense that we had a old Russian trained Olympic lifting coach. So, and the sport of weightlifting. So, and there wasn't necessarily a set program, but you could, go in there during the PE hours, and then, if you bought into some of the stuff, he'd go, hey, if you want to come before practice and be part of the weightlifting club, we'll teach you some of those things. And so felt very fortunate to be able to learn from him because I'd never really heard what a power clean was. It wasn't very traditional. You got these big old bumper plates. The cool part was that even, the 10-pound plate looked like you were lifting a lot of weight, even though you weren't. So
Oh yeah, that's great for bench pressing.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that was enticing. But but then again, when you have Olympic weightlifting coaches too, that's what they want to do, right? So like, hey, it's going to be clean and jerk and snatch and everything that helps you better at those, and as a young athlete, you're like, well, I want big arms. I want a big bench press, all these things, which, doesn't go into the programming. So he was wise in his years too. So he'd let you do some of that stuff, but then you'd also compete and do the things that would make you better at those lifts. But took that for granted, right? And really fell in love with the sport of lifting to a certain degree, but then also just being in the weight room and becoming a gym rat.
So, I mean, can you? What year did you graduate high school? I'm trying to think how
96.
long. 96. Man, you're so young. Oh, yeah. A lot of us got introduced to Olympic weightlifting from Glassman at CrossFit. I mean, Olympic weightlifting and just I've written about this before, just the cost of equipment.
Absolutely.
That guy, it was so expensive I remember I bought my first racks and I won one of the first CrossFit certifications. And it's not like you go online and buy bumper plates. I had to drive down to Salt Lake. I didn't even know, I'd never seen a bumper plate before. I didn't know they existed. So you learned how to snatch and all that stuff early on. Really interesting from that there in high school. Because that's unusual, I think, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And then like you said, you know, trying to find the equipment was half the battle, and then trying to convert it from kilograms to pounds too. Like, what is this? More math? 2.2?
Do you remember back to those high school days? Do you remember was it a percentage based? Were you doing 1 RMs or percentage based programming and stuff?
Roughly.
Do you
There were
remember
some
that?
times where they did put us on a percentage-based program, and it did help, especially for back squat and bench press. Those were the two that we'd be able to do percentage-based stuff on, but not on the Olympic lifts. That was just the old coach in the corner telling you what to put on, and
Oh, really?
you're happy to oblige because again, trying to figure out the math behind what he's calculating with the kilos and pounds. Just all right, coach, and that's the sport of weightlifting too, right? You default to your coach to be able to put the different percentages on that on your bar and in competition versus just the sport coach in the weight room being consistent and periodizing or progressing your 1 RMs.
Now, if I remember right, your daughter was like a state champion for something for Olympic weightlifting.
Yeah, she was
How far
national
did she?
champion.
She was a national champion.
Yeah, national
How
champion.
old?
This was, I think, this was youth. So we're looking 15 years old, 15, 14 years old. It's like wrestling where you have weight classes as well. So
Yeah, yeah.
she was a gold medal in the American Open early on, and she was awesome at it. It was natural to her, and then we got some good coaches to be able to train her up, and she was able to get that title. And then I think that's why she was such a good cheer athlete, is because she went from a transition from lifting weights to lifting people, and it was a
Yeah,
pretty
just
natural
for listeners,
progression.
just so you know, Dave's daughter went to Clemson as a cheerleader there at Clemson. Do you remember back when she started getting into that? I imagine she was doing that with you, but I could be wrong. Do you remember starting to coach her in the Olympic lifts and
Yeah,
just seeing her
absolutely.
move?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I was heavily involved in coaching, all those skills, and then my daughter would be there because just to be there with dad and be a part of the gym, and then all right, hey, let's work on some of this stuff, and it just came so easy. I can't say it was my coaching because it wasn't. It was just came natural to her as a fluid body awareness, and I think those years of gymnastics and competitive cheer just made it easy for her to understand how the body works to be able to, especially those two lifts, the clean and jerk and snatch.
Can you go back to, because you got out of, or you were in Army down in Colorado Springs, right? And then you got out of the Army. And then, well, take me to West Point. You played football at West Point. What was the strength and conditioning program like for you there at West Point? I spent a semester at West Point. I wasn't allowed in the football weight room. I was like, they had all kinds of dirty little weight rooms around, but I was in one of those. And there weren't any bumper plates in them. But tell me about the S&C program at West Point.
Yeah, back then it was really modest. It was fitted with hammer strength equipment, no bumper plates, and that was when I first got there. They had their strength coach really kind of adjusted, their strength and conditioning philosophy to, I guess, help cadets. It was almost that Mike Menser, one set of everything to absolute failure, which was an eye opener. I'd never trained that way. It was tough. It was rough, but it did accommodate us, especially early on. And then we got new strength staff came on board, and it was a little bit more conventional. And you were still with the the squat and the deadlift, more free weights rather than just hammer strength. So that was a little bit more unique, and I never fully embraced that, even though you'd work as hard as you can. I wanted traditional barbell movements and things like that. You assimilate to the program that you're a part of, and default to the subject matter experts that they put you in front of, and had good results. But I missed the barbell lifts. I missed some of those things early on, and then eventually, like my junior and senior year, we brought it back.
Do you remember? Well, see, when you start your gym in Colorado Springs before you got out of the Army, or were you right after, or how soon after? Or how did that happen?
Yeah, so I was interning at the Olympic Training Center, strength and conditioning side, while I was transitioning out of the Army as well.
Oh, really? Okay.
So learning from them and how they train the different sports, whether it was USA Judo, wrestling that they had up in Colorado Springs, to the synchronized swimmers and everything in between. So real eye opener for a lot of those programs, and how hard some of those athletes trained in the weight room, because some of them, again, it was a new culture of being in the weight room, right? So synchronized swimmers, were not traditionally, in the weight room very much. But at the Olympic Training Center, they did have some programming there versus, the wrestlers very used to being in the weight room and whatnot. But when I transitioned out of the Army, then I transitioned right to the fire department. So there was a little bit of gap time in between, but concurrently with that, I was always coaching at a certain level in strength and conditioning coaching. And it wasn't until after I'd been in the fire department for a couple of years that I did finally open a gym and be able to train people for a good amount of time.
Can you go back to remember some of those first programs that you designed, either as an intern or for buddies or whatever, and go through, I guess, what kind of progressions you were running? Let's say you're just doing just a strength. What kind of exercises you're choosing? What the progressions were? Were you doing 1RMs? Were you doing 5x5? Do you remember what you were doing when you first started?
Yeah, for most of them, it was, and then this is all based off of, because I was NSCA trained, because it was headquarters in Colorado Springs. So it's just classic periodization, and we'd be going through our hypertrophy phases, our strength phases, depending on the season of the athlete. So, typical, 4 or 5 sets of 10, depending on 10 to 12.
For hypertrophy, right?
Traditional exercises, and then, transition to that to more strength-based stuff, and depending on where their season was and what the coach needed, some conditioning pieces, but just very traditional, right? We're looking at splitting up the body parts, whether it's push-pull, whether it's upper lower, some Olympic lifts, but not a lot, because they're too technical to be able to teach a lot of the new lifters, even though they're tremendous athletes. Right? A lot of them don't pick up the Olympic lifts very well. So I think a lot of times we could get away with, a hang power clean to an extent, and really utilize that to be able to get some effect with explosiveness and triple extension and all that stuff.
When you opened your own gym, take me back to that time, and what was your programming philosophy going in? What kind of athletes were you working with? And, you started doing your own thing. What were you doing?
Well, we were doing a little bit of a hybrid program, a little bit of CrossFit, but a little bit of strength and conditioning, and trying to figure out where that met best. And it was really kind of that meathead method of, well, I appreciate the work capacity stuff, but I also want to keep up my lifts. I still want to bench, and I still, I like the AMRAPs, and CrossFit at the time was, still fairly new. And it really wasn't until, we went up to, I think it was one of your first programming seminars in Boulder there. Really appreciated, you walking us through, your program philosophy, even though it wasn't called that at the time, but fluid periodization, and how you were able to structure your workouts to adhere to all the goals that you were looking to accomplish with your athletes.
Your work with the high school athletes now, I guess, I know that you are a strength and conditioning coach at the high school you're close to, and it's and your sons play football there. Are you there year round, just working the football team, working with all the athletes, just doing the summer stuff? What's your job there now from on the strength and conditioning side?
So right now I do predominantly work with the football team because I'm coaching the football team and there's only so much time to dedicate to it. But I originally started because they wanted someone there for the summer program to give the sport coaches a break. So they wanted to bring in an outside strength coach to be able to program and run strength sessions for all the sports through a summer day. So you'd start out at 7 a.m. and you'd have two groups of football players. Then you'd have women's basketball coming in after that. And then you'd have boys baseball later on in the afternoon. And they were all hour program sessions, very much like when I was at the Olympic Training Center helping out. You'd have program blocks of different sports coming in. So I was familiar with that. Obviously, the resources aren't as nice at the high school level sometimes. And then also being able to adjust that for summer training because, coming from my own gym, I had my gym set up a specific way and I programmed a certain way based off that setup. And then being able to recommend certain layouts, equipment, and things to the athletic director and the coaches that luckily they were receptive to because they just wanted to get results and have someone come in from the outside to be able to consult and also give them some good results.
So you're doing the summer programming for pretty much all the different types of athletes. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, at first I was.
Now so you get them. When would you start getting them? In June, mid June, July?
Yeah, right there in start of June.
So you have about a couple months is all. Were you going through the periodization of or are you still doing that?
No, so I predominantly work with the football team now year round.
Football team, right? Okay, yeah. So let's take it back to those first years there with the summer. Were you doing 3 weeks of hypertrophy, 3 weeks of strength, into power, a little bit more conditioning? Do you remember what you were doing back then in terms of periodization?
Well, initially, I just wanted to see what we were working with.
Yeah.
So one of the questions I think anyone strength coach asks the sport coach or the athletic director going in, what are they currently doing to get an idea of what are we working with? Where do we need to start? What's going to be the most efficient and effective way to program? If they've never done any barbell lifts, then that's going to be a learning curve. And you have to assess whether you want to, start that battle or if you want to, work with just dumbbells or whatever dumbbells and bands, whatever they've been using before. But they had school weightlifting at a certain level. So it was fairly solid. So I was comfortable then utilizing barbell movements for most of it, being able to assess what our weight room looked like to see how we were going to break it down and the number of athletes, because that's a big thing because you're going to have 60 kids in a weight room, just you.
Yeah,
And
I've been there.
and you got 60 kids, 60 minutes. And, with all the expectations in the world. And then varying from the freshman athlete just coming from 8th grade to the experienced athlete on varsity, and you put them all together. So trying to...
Were you coaching co-ed sessions or
Yes.
where they broke up? They were co-ed.
They were
That's
co-ed
even
for
more
certain
difficult.
sports.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Okay.
again, trying to get buy-in, trying to get a little bit of everything. It wasn't progressive based then. It was very foundational. Very, hey, we're going to...
I mean, unpack that. What do you mean foundational? Be specific.
So foundational in the sense where we're going to break it up into push and pull. We're going to break it up into upper body, lower body, and total body. And then we're going to start with 4 sets of 10 and see how they respond. We're going to add in accessory lifts. We're going to add in core. But it was all based off of, again, what I learned from you in the fluid periodization. So we're going to take a strength element and then we are going to not waste time. We're going to use that time actively, and we're going to move from a strength lift to an accessory lift to we're going to have them rest. And while they're resting, we're going to do some sort of, whether it's flexibility, mobility, or core work, that active rest to be able to prepare them for the next set round of a strength lift, and being able to, utilize that and keep them working, for 60 minutes. Because, what I found was at the high school level, the more time you give them to rest, the more distractions that they're going to find. So if I can get them working for 45 to 60 minutes, of good solid work, and we're going to oscillate the intensities too, right? And that's just the natural progression of, that design. You got a solid strength lift, and then you're going to, which is, you are looking to get stronger, and, you keep an eye on that. And then their active rest is working in accessory lift, or, one of those core lifts, or the mobility and flexibility piece. And
I remember doing that, and I would take, just based on equipment, I'd have like, half the athletes working at a few squat racks doing leg stuff, and the other half doing Scotty Bobs and pull-ups, and then in the middle of the session I swap them so they could go. You were doing the same thing, I'm sure, with equipment, right?
Absolutely. And then over the years, we were able to start getting a couple more racks, get the weight room set up a little bit more effectively, put everything out to the side. So we're getting 12 squat racks, 12 to 13 squat racks. We can get 4 athletes per rack.
Yeah, you can run 4 athletes per rack, yeah.
Right. So then we're going, 62 athletes, and we're able to, have them work through, the exercises, that they can. And we usually do 4 days a week. That's what, the coach says you have access to. So that's what we would program for. And it was pretty effective getting them, stronger. But also the high school athlete comes with, a lot of things where it's not in a vacuum, because some of them are in season at the time, and even in the summer they're going, to club baseball, they're doing all these different things. So I wish I could program in that vacuum where it's just me and the athlete and I have full control for a year, but that's never the case. It's always a little bit dirty, and you have to be flexible.
Let's fast forward here to now. You're working just with the football team year round, and football just ended. Well, do you have is it enough research at the school to have football team have its own weight room?
So it's a shared weight room.
Right. And you had a lot of input in that weight room. Kind of designed that weight room for me. How many racks you got? How big is it? Do you have anything in the middle, open space? Tell me how you got that thing laid out.
So right now, like I said, we have 12 racks, so cages. So there's 10 conventional cage setups, right? And then there's three freestanding racks. And we have barbells to meet all of those. So everything's off to the side. So there's 3 racks that we can move in and out depending on if we need to add those 3 extra racks, depending on the size of the group that we have. But everything's on the outskirts, and we try to have, that space in the middle open. Right, as we learned before, that open space is extremely valuable. So that's where we're going to do our Olympic lifts. That's where we're going to do our jumps. That's where we're going to do, a lot of different work. But everything has a full complement of barbells, bumper plates, and we have bands, we have boxes, they have benches. But it's still very bare bones. We try to get some of those glute ham machines in, but if you have 2, you have 0. Unless you have 6
enough
of them,
for everybody.
Right, then we can program them in. The same thing with trap bars or whatever it is. If we don't have at least 6 of them, it's going to be very difficult to program those in, for 60 plus athletes. So being able to see what we can get in the weight room, and then being able to use, like, vertical pulls are always something that's very difficult in a large high school setting. Yeah, you'd love that every football player can do pull-ups, but if you've ever been around high school athletes, from freshmen to seniors, it's varying degrees. I mean, you're lucky if you're able to get 3 pull-ups on average, because it's just not. But then you supplement it with bands, it's kind of effective, not really. So, the vertical, you still try to solve those puzzles, and you work around it. But we have dumbbells, but not enough, as you can imagine, trying to program in when everyone's going to be working out at the same time. You have the traditional high school blend of everything from 10 to, 100, but then you only have one set of them. So we try to bolster that with, the 20s and the 45s and the ones that most athletes are going to use for some of the exercise that we prescribe them.
How big a space is it?
I'd say it's about 800 square feet.
Do you have any coaches helping you?
We do, off and on. So where we can get them early, it's actually a class called 0 Hour, and it meets at like 6 a.m. So that's a class that the coaches that are also teachers will be there to instruct. And then the best results I've had is when I've been there every day before I go into work, and I'll coach them in the morning session and lead them through it.
Do your racks have platforms with them, or like formal platforms you see in like fancy overbuilt college weight rooms?
No, I need to send you a picture because we did have a couple dedicated platforms. We did have 4 platforms initially.
Yeah.
They just ate into the space because if you weren't using
Oh
them,
yeah,
then they
yeah,
got in
yeah.
the way, and we couldn't do, so over the years we were able to get rid of those, which kind of pains you a little bit because they're nice, but it wasn't effective and efficient. So yeah, no platforms in there. Just think of a basic rack, bare bones, with, the ability to do a pull up or something overhead.
Take me through coaching in terms of how you like to set yourself up to run that. Generally, I'd like to be at a 45 to the athletes. In other words, I don't want to be looking at their chest. I don't want to be looking at their back. I want to be able to set it up so I can quickly look at almost every athlete at about 45 to them, either from the front or from the back, because I was always looking for low backs collapsing. And so I would set the the racks up in that way where I could walk down one line, almost stay in one spot, and with a few steps to be able to see all the athletes. How does your weight room set up, and where do you position yourself? Because if you're the educated eye, you're looking for that, right? So how do you set yourself up, and how has that changed over the years? You work with all those athletes.
Yeah, absolutely. It is setting up the environment so you can monitor all those things, especially with that number of kids and the constant movement, right? It's not just one of the 4 moving at all times. It's all 4 of them moving, at
Right,
all
right, right.
times. So, I'm very particular about how I set it up. Like they have their lanes. So I want, all the barbells facing one way if they're out of the racks, because we'll do our Olympic lifts out of the racks. We'll do our deadlifts out of the racks. We'll, do all those hinge
See, like
movements
a
out
barbell's
of the
lined up
racks.
like this,
Yes.
right, and facing one way, and the athletes all like looking at each other's back or something.
Yes. And so
Got
you got to be on it, right? I mean, there's definitely an on-ramp program that we have with them in the summer before they start. It's taken years to get them to a certain level where we can, start progressing it to a basic point of, safety and effectiveness. But, after they've completed that, onboarding program, then yeah, line them up, we're one right in front of the other so I can see. And you do have to be mobile. You're constantly walking around encouraging them, but also, walking down that line so you can have that 45-degree angle to be able to see them, and how they're doing and give them the cues that they need to. Now, when they're doing their barbell lifts, squatting, deadlifts, the things in the rack, again, walking down, you have the angle you have. So you still try
Yeah,
to
yeah,
be at
yeah.
that
It's not the same,
45, but,
right?
the mirrors were in there before I was there. So, but there are mirrors, and it is effective
There, so
because
you can see them through the mirrors,
so I
right?
can see, I can get the right angle that I want, by looking at the reflection as well. So that comes in handy at times, and it's not just for vanity. So we can
So
correct
you've
technique.
got 4 kids per rack. Let's say they're doing heavy back squats. You got one kid squatting, one kid spotting, one kid doing mobility, and another kid resting or getting ready to lift. Am I missing something, or what's how are they doing?
Kind of. So like let's take what they're doing right now. You're doing back squats. You're going to do the strength progression, and then immediately upon racking it, you're going to do and I have them doing explosive movements. You're going to do
So you're
your
doing some
squats.
contrast training right away.
Absolutely. Because I want to get them moving, because I don't have time to break it up into, hey, we're going to do our explosive training here, out on the field. We're going to do it all here within an hour. So yeah, you're going to go from your heavy back squat, and then you're going to rack it. Then you're going to go right into your explosive movement, your contrast training. And then I'm either going to have you doing some core work, lay you down for a little bit, or work on our mobility or flexibility. And then after that, then, we're always having one person to either spot or get ready for the weight change. Because if you don't, then everything's going to be taking too long. You got to have the one
Right, right,
person
right.
that's going to be swapping out the weights while the other people are waiting and working.
So you've got that block for back squats. In my mind, that's like 15 minutes to get all them kids through 5 or 6 rounds. Is that what you're thinking too? 15 minutes?
Yeah, but if we're going like more of a dedicated strength cycle,
Yeah.
we'll increase the amount of rounds because we're dropping the reps, right? So we may have 8 like on our, because hey, one got to give them a couple sets to work up to their working weights, and then give them the full 5 sets, 4 sets to in their working sets to get stronger and hit their progressions.
So let's go ahead and spin up now. Football season's over. Are you working with the football kids now, or are you giving a break until spring to bring them back to spring to start prep for the summer?
So we started in January. So as soon as the kids got back to work, we started them right there. Obviously have some multi-sport athletes, but those that aren't in multi-sports, we're hitting it hard with a hypertrophy based program as much as we can, because we're trying to get them stronger too. But I think there's something to be said for getting some extra volume in and having them work on the fundamental reps of, what they're trying to do. And we do have injuries and all those things. For the most part, they're healthy, they're ready to go, and they're ready to work.
What take me through? I mean, if you remember back to last, I guess you're there now. What you're doing now? You're still in your hypertrophy cycle now?
Yep.
What lifts are you doing, and what's your set rep scheme, and what's the progression look like?
So right now, this is the first time we have some other assistant coaches, and now they're running it because of now my office schedule with the fire department. So this is their first time programming it at there, and they are working. We've already transitioned to lower and upper, and now they've been able to do more of a push-pull day. So they're looking at about 4 sets, 10 to 12 reps, and some things are percentage based, and others are up to the athlete to go hard but doable.
So are you doing body part splits?
Yes.
So you're doing like lower body, upper body, or back, or what's your split look like you're doing 4 days a week, right?
Right. So you have your upper body split, which is trying to get our bench press, our overhead press, and our back movements in. So that'll be mirrored on almost the same day. So a Monday and a Thursday will look the same.
Same lifts. Yep.
And then our lower body day, will be our Olympic movement, our barbell movement, in our hinge lift. And that's going to be the same, on Tuesday that it is on Friday.
How are you doing hypertrophy that's percentage based? Are you doing a 1RM? Are you guessing a 1RM? How are you doing that?
We get their max, so we want to be able to give them an idea of what weights, what loading should be at the bar. Because if not, then they're just guessing, and them coming in at 6 a.m. I don't want them to feel like today I feel like not going heavy or going heavy. I want them to be able to program it out. So we have this program software called Rack Coach, and it's a timer-based thing, and we're able to put in their lifts, their numbers, and the percentages that you want them, but it also keeps them on a timed pattern. So they will rotate every 30 seconds. They'll get 30 seconds of rest, then they'll start the next exercise at 30 seconds, and so on and so forth. So, and there's an audio beep, and it'll have on the monitor what weight they're supposed to do on this set. So as a coach,
does every rack have like an iPad or something up there?
No, I wish it did.
Okay.
I wish it did. At some of the nice schools, they have those, but we have one monitor that's over, above the coach's desk, and they have to quickly come over, see where they're at, and go off of what's on the board. And it's good for coaches because you're not going to know every person's percentage. So I can quickly look on the board that says, hey, Joe Smith is supposed to be lifting 10 reps, and he's supposed to be at 100 pounds, but I'm looking over that, and he's he has 80 pounds. Well, we need to go talk with him real fast and go, hey, what's going on? Let's go. Let's get it up. Or, he's got 135 pounds and he's barely getting, 6 reps when he's supposed to be getting 10, be able to hold them accountable to that.
So I mean, you're not doing like a 1RM for a dumbbell curl, I assume. So
Absolutely
you
not.
probably got your 1RMs for this hypertrophy. What are your upper body lifts that you're doing percentage-based programming for?
So we have 4 lifts that we test for. So
go ahead.
Bench press, of course, got to go bench press. And then we have back squat. And then we have our power clean. And then we have push press. So those are the ones that we found that we can get maxes pretty often without taking too much time, and plug those in and track those. Right? We'd love to track all of them, but those are the 4 that I've decided on that we can do effectively, and that's going to give us the biggest bang for our buck.
And so now for push press, in this case, are you doing 10 reps, 4x10 push press?
So 4x10.
Hypertrophy?
Yes. So
really, even for push press?
Well, for push press, because I'll also cycle it up where, the first 2 rounds, I'm having them do strict overhead press.
Okay.
So, and that's their warm-up.
At the same rep scheme?
Yes.
At the same reps? Okay,
right.
okay.
The percentage isn't there. So I'm like, whatever weight you want to work up to. And then once your shoulders get warmed up, because we're isolating it, then we're going to move into, 4 sets of 10 with push press. So now we're activating the hips, dip and drive. And, I forget the percentage base that we have off there, but it's somewhere in between where it's pretty solid for most of them. Even if their push press form isn't awesome, they're still going to be able to challenge themselves at it.
Have you? I learned hard way one time doing 1RM push press with athletes on a low back injury. Have you had any issues with that doing a push press 1RM?
No, not yet. We do tell them, hey, if you can't get it, you can't get it. We're not fighting. This isn't an
You're not
absolute
letting them
strength
stick,
test.
right? Yeah.
Right. So if you're not getting it, put it back down. Uh, power through legs, activate the hips a little bit faster, see if we can get it. And it's fairly safe lift, but, you do have those stubborn lifters, they're going to wiggle themselves and, bend the back, but you just try to coach that out of.
So how in the world do you not have the deadlift in your 1RM set?
That's kind of been a point of contention, right?
Oh, I bet.
It has been one of those things that even though how much coaching I've tried to do can never take the, 60 kids trying to make sure that they're not just loading up the back and just trying to get the reps at whatever cost they want. And I haven't found a successful way with 60 kids to be able to do that and it be effective.
You mentioned trap bar deadlifts earlier. You don't have those, or have you tried that? That's
We
one
do.
solution for some coaches.
So we do have 6 of them, and
yeah,
one of the new coaches is programming that in. So I'm kind of interested to see
watching.
how that goes.
Yeah.
But we get. I feel like we're getting our hinge movements off of our cleans. I feel like we do a good job of also doing the hinge lift sometimes and keeping it lighter. But then we're also doing some bilateral work with single leg RDLs, moving those hips and hinging that way to be able to work that. Yeah, it has been one of those things where that's just a classic lift that if I could have train 10 kids and be with them all the time, that would definitely be in the programming. But you have to make concessions when you're dealing with different populations.
I could never get, and I'm talking 25 to 45-year-old men who didn't come through, some type of Olympic weightlifting program. Probably 6 of them couldn't do a power clean right. It was a deadlift and a reverse curl. I mean, I think the power clean is like what got to be one of the most difficult lifts to learn. I can't do it right. Joe Ken, one of my coaching heroes, he wrote a whole book just on teaching the power clean, which tells you how fucking hard it is to teach this goddamn lift. And God, who's that guy? West Side Barbell guy.
Louis Simmons.
Yeah, Louis Simmons. Have you heard him badmouth the power clean? He says,
Oh, yeah.
just do squat jumps with the. So I mean, tell me how are you having good results with the friggin' power clean?
Well, we have it evolve in certain stages. So we start with a hang clean, right? Because that's more intuitive.
Just a little bit maybe less difficult.
Yes, because again, that population of athletes, something that they will tend to lose their mind when you then take it from the floor. So again, maybe it's it's probably definitely a coaching flaw on my end, but the idea is
Haven't you seen the same thing like working with firefighters?
Yeah, but
Oh, yeah.
So again, probably the commonality is me as a coach, but we'll start at hang cleans.
Yeah.
Right? Because we want the hip activation. We want, get that shrug and some of those movements in there. Because I think that's valuable. The biggest thing is working with some limitations and wrist flexibility, and you do have to teach it. But at the high school level, we've been fairly successful to be able to go from hang cleans then to power cleans, and it does take them about a year to learn it. At the high school level, but I think it's effective.
What's your set rep scheme for power cleans and a hypertrophy side?
Well, that one we don't. That's strictly basic. We're not doing
Not doing that.
hypertrophy for an Olympic lift. So
Got it.
we'll be able to still work on our power and explosiveness with that. We're maintaining, right? We're maintaining that lift and that power and getting them the reps and getting them better at it, but then we'll work, hypertrophy, for some, whether it's we call it like a power shrug or something like that.
Yeah, Dan John taught me the power curls. That was a great one. So on a in your gym now or in your sessions now, let's say they're doing upper body part split. Correct me if I'm wrong. They're doing bench press, and would they be doing bench press and push press on the same day?
Yes.
Okay. And so, what else is in that session? Probably some pull ups, and then because you still seem like you'd have a little bit of time left in that session for some extra stuff.
Yeah, well, we try to give them some adequate rest time to get back to it. And just the cycle itself, when you got 4 athletes rotating through, it's going to be a lot of built-in rest. So, right, we're trying to
Right.
get some things. So when we do our push press, then we can also, after they're done with that, then we can have them do maybe one-arm dumbbell rows, I think that we have, or some band work. And then when we're going to, doing, bent over rows or whatever, then they're working on some shoulder auxiliary work or something like that. So trying to answer your question it's full,
The session's full. Yeah, I'm just wondering
if
if you're doing like a
anything.
little conditioning at the end or thing. Go
No,
ahead.
and that's been kind of, what we've been programming in, trying to program in, hey, give me 5 minutes and we're going to do some, all out kind of, competition, whether it's, max push-ups or, some little piece to just some finisher to get the competitive juices going.
You're going to roll into strength next, I assume, but I could be wrong. After you
Absolutely.
get through hypertrophy, what are you planning right now for strength?
So now we're going, and we've done a couple of different things. We've done kind of like Big 24, which, I like doing that because the guidelines are set, you know. However, the downfall for that sometimes is when kids will miss sessions here and there. And then, oh, hey, coach, where am I at? Well, what's the last thing you did? Oh, geez. Well, now you're being very retroactive, and that never works well. So the percentage-based stuff is I'm moving through. We've also tried 5-3-1, for athletes, and maybe I just didn't understand it as well as it's supposed to be designed, but I didn't have as much effectiveness with the 5-3-1 set up for athletes in our environment. I did take some pieces from it. I like the all-out AMRAPs at the end because the kids seem to buy into that at certain percentages. But like the Big 24 programming really helped in the sense that here's what it is, here's what we're doing, you minus this, you add this next week, you add that next week, minus 10 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 seemed to work the best. But when we started programming with our rack coach, we could put in a dedicated percentage to that. So we'd start very basic, and very modest, and I'd see how the athletes responded to it. Because honestly, even though as much as we'd supervise it, sometimes we get some false data, some false reporting data by some of the athletes. I'm like, oh, you can't do 8 sets of 5 at, 75% or whatever it is. And then we just monitor it. So I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious. Are you still focusing your strength work, or do you plan on doing for this next cycle, or maybe you can remember to next year on those major 4 lifts? Are you adding any lifts to the strength side, or everything else going to be auxiliary? In other words, you're still gonna do back squat, bench, push press, and power clean for your primary strength list for the strength cycle, and not add anything else in there, and then do everything else auxiliary?
Well, we've been trying to, so some of the new coaches are trying to put in certain percentage-based stuff for barbell split squats, for instance, in the rack. And, I'm like, all right, you program it. Let's see how it goes. I've never done that percentage-based with barbell split squats because, especially with...
I know going to 1RM is pretty tough because you're so vulnerable as an athlete.
But again, you're working up to a heavy, right? So I think that's kind of the distinction. Sometimes we're going, hey, just give us the heavy double and call it good, and then we'll try to, get a percentage off that. But
it'll also take twice as long because you got to do each leg.
Absolutely.
These things come off. I know. Whoa.
So these attack dogs, trying to mute them. But
No worries.
I've always been a fan of dumbbell split squats. So that is something that we always have in the program.
Walking lunges or split squats?
Split squats because for the limited space we have.
Yeah.
But then it's hard to progress that because now you're dealing with dumbbells, and now we're dealing with a moving target of what dumbbells that we have available for 60 kids, right?
And where they are left on the floor. Right?
And where they are. So there is some flexibility built into that. And like, hey, coach, I have 40s, but someone else has the 50s. Okay, well, I know it's not the scientific method, but hey, do 14 reps instead of 10 reps, or like,
I
you
know.
know, and,
I know.
and,
You
and
gotta
I
be
know that,
careful.
it kills you as a strength coach not to be able to do that. But, those are some of the accommodations that you have to make. You have to be flexible. You have to be able to, you know, oscillate, some of the intensities, but also um, know the totality of your training, right? I want bilateral work. I want also lateral work, with it. So can I do that? Well, yeah, I think it's important enough, but what, I'm not going to be able to, progress that. We're going to have to
So
go off
you
of
believe in
perceived
lateral work?
exertion. What's that?
You believe in lateral strength work?
As an accessory, right? As
As
an
an accessory.
accessory, right? So if I can do some lateral dumbbell lunges, then, I feel like we're moving that way. Or if we can do lateral jumps, so we pair that with a lateral side to side jump, right? Just to
Got
get
it.
them moving in those different directions.
Can you remember
So
back to Big 24? You're doing that programming. Are you trying to do right now? Generally, I'll program 2 sessions at the same progression before I'll bump the progression. Is that what you were doing, or do you remember how many sessions at each progression you were doing?
no, we would do two
Two.
because
Okay. Then you bump
it
it.
usually takes them one session to figure it out, and
Right.
then they know what to expect, and then they can hit that session again running.
Got
So
it.
I felt that worked, especially when you're dealing with younger athletes.
Has there been any progression that you like? We had some pretty good luck with Super Squat with the high school kids. Really good luck with it. Has there been any other type of progression that you've tried and either was an utter failure? You mentioned 5-3-1, or it was good but just undoable because you're athletes and equipment stuff.
Yeah, there really hasn't been anything that's been consistently new. So like I said, I had a coach come in. He really wanted to do 5-3-1. I'm like, okay, we'll give it a shot in the off season and let's put it in. And it wasn't getting the adaptation that we wanted. It was either too easy for a lot of them, and it seemed almost like a moving target based off of the percentages we were using with their training maxes and everything. And again, probably on my end as the coach facilitating it and maybe not understanding the program completely. I thought I did, and I thought I followed all the steps, but it just wasn't getting the desired effect. So being able to just incrementally grow their percentages, so if we're working in, sets of 5, for instance, be able to, okay, they had a good work. We've been consistent. We're going to up the percentage on this and see how they respond.
Got it. Are you still doing contrast training during the strength stuff, or do you have a set cycle that is what you'd call power or plyos or anything like that?
Yeah, so we're usually doing the contrast training predominantly, but there are a 4-week cycle where I'm like, no, we're just going to
Just
rest.
strength.
We're just resting,
Okay. Okay.
and
But just rest, right? For
right,
Big 20.
right. So they're not doing accessory work, I may have them do some flexibility or mobility, but that's where there's 2 rest cycles for the 4, right? So if we have 4 athletes, they have 4 cycles, hey, one's a spot and one's a weight change, where you can kind of sneak them up some extra rest so they can hit their numbers that they're supposed to get.
Are you able to get all 4 lifts in one session, or are you splitting the 2 and 2 for the lifts?
Yeah, we're splitting them
What
up.
what
From what I
work for you?
remembered when we were doing it, we were splitting it up, and because we did, our back squat, we did our bench press, we did our clean, and then we were trying to do the push press with it to be able to cycle that one in, but not we'd have to reduce the weight on that a little bit because it couldn't keep up with like the bench press and the power clean weight that we could on push press. So we
That's
try,
interesting. So the Big 24 progression wasn't working for push press, and
not that I found, not with the young athletes, because most of the time they're, even though we have them for 4 years, they're still learning how to really, dominate their hips and, get that explosiveness, which I think is valuable. But again, it still is, extremely core dominant, it's still upper body dominant. And they're just usually not a lot of them are at that level where they can progress that one as quickly as the others. So we try
are
to
you
do
doing
upper
like
body day and lower body day with that.
oh really? Okay, so let's say you're doing bench press and push press, or bench press and a pull one day, power clean, back squat the next day, and then you go right back to. Would you have a Wednesday off
Yeah.
and then come back? Okay, Wednesday's off, so they get a day break before you come back and hit them again.
So that's what we've evolved to be able to have that Wednesday off. Now, before, sometimes when you're the coach, you're just given the days you can train. So it'd be like, hey, we're working out Monday through Friday. or I'm sorry, Monday through Thursday. And so that would kind of throw off the split a little bit because we do, so when given, that assignment, then I'd do upper body, lower body, and then I'd have a dynamic day where we're going to be doing a lot of moving, more power-based stuff, and then go back to a total body strength day. So
Have you ever messed around with that dynamic stuff? Simmons, like deadlifts really fast, or when you say dynamic, is it power lifts and like jumps and stuff?
yeah, it's more, the plyometric work,
Get it?
the foot-based stuff, stuff that I'd love to program in all the other sessions, but we just don't have time. And they just get cut on the editing floor. So you put it in, like ball slams and different things like that you'd like to work. And then I think the kids like the novelty of some of those things, and you keep it fresh and then give them a little bit of a, working day off, working recovery day, and then come back on a total body day, the next day to be able to piece together your upper body and lower body day and then have a total body day, if that makes sense.
Got it. So you're doing hypertrophy, then you got your 4 weeks of strength. Then what do you move into? We're probably into, May, June, end of school then, or at the end, or at you at the end of school then.
Yeah, we are. And then we'll kind of load up another strength session. We'll hit the numbers. We call it an arena event where we're all max out, get our numbers, see where everyone's at, try to put up a leaderboard, and then start again, And even though there's no design rest, our athletes, for the most part, will be taking summer vacation with their families at some point. They will be missing so much. So being able to get everyone on the same page of a deload week or a complete week off just comes natural.
Yeah.
Because of those things. And then we'll have summer camp mixed in there as well.
There are football camps and stuff,
Yes.
right? Can you take me into one of those movement days, or plyo power days? What is a typical, or what would one of those look like in terms of exercises, set reps? Are you doing plyos, sprints, agility drills?
Yeah, so that's when we'll try to get them outside a little bit too, weather dependent, so we can get the sleds working. So that's when we have our sled sprints back and forth. So that's one session. And we have one where they're working their, foot speed, all their running form and techniques. And then we'll also have, a session with our, farmer's carry for some active rest. But then that's where I also like to program some arm workout, some arms and things like that on that day, just to kind of break it up and give them a little bit of that dessert, that they like to do naturally. So it's kind of a fun day.
Yeah.
Right. So
Got it.
we'll try to sprint, we'll try to do sleds, we'll try to do our carries, some technique work, but then also throw in, some arms and some just, aesthetics type of stuff that I think they enjoy.
Got it. You ever try Nordic hamstrings or anything else to make up for the Ph.D. machines?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, so it's tough because one of the things that I took from my West Point days was our coach was emphatical about doing manual neck exercises, and love it because there's no easy way to strengthen the neck.
Yeah, I've looked into it. There's no easy way.
No easy way. So
there's no machine for it yet.
So we'd start and we'd do, it was almost a rite of passage for Army football. Like you do, manual resistance, 2-way, 4-way neck. So you'd fight
you got
someone.
One partner working with another,
Yep.
right?
Right. And it was hands-on. It was hands-on. And, it was nice because, at school they had towels and you can use it, but it got pretty disgusting if you don't have it. So I tried implementing that at the high school because, we really were worried about concussions. And if we're not training the neck, they've showed you can buy $100 mouthpiece, $1,000 helmet, all these other things. But if you're not strengthening the neck, that's what, studies show. If you can get, just a little bit of strength increase in the neck, you're dropping down your susceptibility for concussions. So I'm like, this is something we can actually apply. So I started doing the manual neck, and then COVID hit. And
yeah, that was it.
It's tough because then, you can't really have hands-on. We're trying to just get in the weight room and clean off barbells, much less getting hands-on people. So then once we were kind of cleared with that, just didn't find a good sanitary way to be able to do that with, how much the kids sweat and, hands on and all those things. So I'm still looking for that. But that was one of the effective exercises I wanted to try to implement, but I never really got traction. But the Nordic leg curls were one of those, it it's up there with the most, underutilized exercises, I feel. So, but I had to get creative. We can't get all these, $400 piece of Nordic, you know, machines that they sell out there. There's some cool ones out there that they
If they
have.
just hold your ankles down or something.
Well, so that's what I found a way that we can anchor their feet underneath the squat racks and then get these bolstered yoga pads to be able to put in and to be able to then work that progression. So we were able to do that, but then, we bought they didn't hold up to the amount of use that were being put in. So we need to buy another set of those pads because without the right pad, it just tears up the knees and, the kids aren't
Yeah.
doing it right. So we found a way to implement it, but I want to be able to find a better way to implement it consistently because we were able to do those in the off season. I think, trying to bulletproof the hamstrings and, that was a way I felt like we could do it. But yeah, it was very, it was very austere the way we were doing it and very creative. So hopefully we can find a better way to do that. And if you didn't have a good partner.
Yeah, yeah. Did you get any? Do you have responsibility for some conditioning in the summer for the kids, or is that kind of left up to the head coach of the football team?
I leave that up to the sport coaches. So when they start talking about some of those things, when we start talking about skill specific work and speed and agility to a certain degree, I go, we have to make choices depending on how much time we have with the athletes.
Right.
I would love to take all the time that I have, 1 hour a day, 4 days a week, to be able to dedicate that to strength because even I feel that is, we could do more. That's the constraint that you're given. So that's what you have to work with. So they were cool with that.
Have you developed strength standards by position and by grade for your football players?
No, because
Or goals or targets?
No, because they've been all over the place, honestly. So, you get linemen, you'd think your linemen would be your strongest members, but then you have these, for the last couple of years, we had, some of our strongest kids were our receivers or our linebackers or, so there was no way to, designate who's going to be at the level where you can then start to do more specialized training according to position group. That was a goal, right? Like, hey, receivers need this and linemen need more of that. But then the more intricate we got with that, the more it just became, an accounting nightmare to be able to hold everyone accountable to it. And, like, what does every athlete need on a basic level that we can get them better at?
Have you ever investigated or done bigger, faster, stronger programming?
A little bit. Right, just the
Yeah.
principles, because way back when, that was one of the foundational books.
Yeah,
we love.
that was I was doing 531 in 1983.
Right.
It was called Bigger, Faster, Stronger.
Yes.
Yeah. But I do remember he did have strength standards set up for by position, and it's been a long time since I looked at them. Is your high school big enough where there aren't that many kids who play both ways, or do you have several kids who do play both ways?
So it is big enough where we can have them just go one way.
Got
But
it.
then the way our head coach does it, and I like it, is he starts the off season and the first half of the season where every kid has two positions and they're trained going out offense and defense. And then once it comes down to halfway through the season, then we evaluate, okay, do we need this person on both sides of the ball? If so, then he'll continue to go both ways, but then we transition to them just playing on one side of the field. So then we'll have a handful of athletes that will play both.
You mentioned earlier when we were talking that you started coaching freshmen. What are you doing in terms of the sport coaching now for the football team? What's your coaching job?
So I'm the varsity defensive line coach.
Has being a sport coach changed the way you caused you to change any things you're doing in the weight room?
It has, because I can kind of see where the practices are going and, what's demanded of them and being able to adjust that. Or, I had a certain expectation that they were going to go out there and be doing, 20 gassers after every practice and keep on doing that, but that's not how football is these days. So they do conditioning, gassers between every drill, throughout the practices. And so it's not that culmination exercise at the end where everyone just, dreads looking forward to. But I can tell when hands-on, when they're having their good days and when it's going to be demanded of them. So for instance, Tuesdays are the day when we go full contact, all out, during the season. And I know that's going to be a day that, is, they're going to need some recovery on that day. And then the next day on that Wednesday is, they call it No Sweat Wednesday, is where, you take the pads off and you're going more through the footwork, and it's more cerebral. It's not as physical. It's not as, you're not going, full contact all the time. So being able to understand those things and then look and go, well, okay, for an in-season program, then how do we take that information and adjust it to benefit the athletes rather than constantly put them in the grinder and just go hard longer and faster and, be tougher.
Did any in working with high school girls, I imagine you have, maybe 20, 30, if you're lucky, 50% of the kids you're working with. I guess you're just working with football now, but prior when you were working in the weight room with all the kids, any lessons learned, mistakes you made working with girls? Or did you treat them just the same? I always just treat them the same, but I mean, maybe that was wrong.
No, and that's the approach I took as well. And I found that I'd have to push the weight on them a little bit more. So again, generally speaking, their form was always better because they'd want to learn, the lifts better. Some of the male sport athletes think they already know it all. So the coaching, they'll be a little bit more resistant to coaching. But, for the most part, I loved how, the female sport athletes would accept the coaching, work on it, but then you'd have to tell them to add more weight. So a lot of times the percentage-based stuff, you'd accelerate it, or you'd actually find yourself maxing out, getting a 1-rep max quicker than normally with the boys, because I feel like you had to prove to them that they're actually getting stronger. So we're going to get the numbers and then we're going to recalculate our percentages, or just, look, you did that really easy. Let's add 5 pounds, to the ones that aren't percentage based. So, but most of the time it would be treating them the same.
Yeah, I always made a conscious decision never to put weaker boys with girls on the same rack, no matter how weak the boy was. He was always training with the boys. Did you learn the same thing? I kind of had I mean, similar with you, or because all boys are supposed to be strong, even though a lot of them aren't when they come in that age.
Yeah. So, like I learned it from you too. You got to protect the egos, depending on, especially at that age. So, there'd be times where we'd have the softball team and the baseball team just because the numbers allowed for it. And we'd have 20 from here, 20 from there. And, we try to put them with their own teammates. So, and not really split them up, just one so they could build a rapport with their teammates and push each other. And it's more enjoyable. And I found that, if you force someone to work out with other people that they didn't know or they weren't comfortable with, it worked against you more than it benefited.
Got it. Would you say that working with high school athletes, I remember I had a coach he was assistant coach with me, and it was a long day, and we were scheduled to go to the high school that day, and I was kind of whining about it. And he was like, "This is the best part of the day." And it turned me around because it was the best. I mean, working with kids is the best part. Has that been your experience just in work with athletes, that working with high school kids has been the most rewarding coaching for you on the strength side?
It is, because that's originally why I got into the strength and conditioning part of it, is because that's, I felt like those that poured into me and that, I remember was based off of, learning the principles of weight training and that delayed gratification of you can put in the work now and see the results later. And there was something special about that. You didn't need, again, you could be skilled or not skilled. If you put the work in the weight room, you were going to find, benefit. It was going to benefit you, physically, but it was also going to benefit you mentally. And I love that portion of it. And with high school athletes in particular, they grow so much in those 4 years that if you can get them to believe in themselves that, hey, if you do the work, good things will happen, right? Both physically and mentally, you see a lot of changes. And I think you develop good adults. You develop a better adult by putting them through, such training.
Was it any issues with coaching your own sons there in the weight room? I mean, did they have this expectation they needed to be strong, or were you extra hard on them anytime that ever come up?
Not in the weight room. No. I think they, I think they enjoyed having me in the weight room because
Yeah,
they like to work hard and they'd get
yeah, yeah.
frustrated when other people weren't working hard. So I felt like if I'm in there, I can control it, control the tempo and the expectation and all those things. So I think they enjoyed that part of it. Now, being a sport coach and coaching my kids, completely different. So that was, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But I think for all my kids, they enjoyed me coaching them in the weight room, because that was fun. And it was fun for me.
So have you worked with high school athletes? What, 8, 10 years now? How long you been working with them in the weight room?
Yeah, it's been that long. It's been about 8 years.
Biggest programming mistake you made with high school kids in those years?
Trying to do too much, trying to, put too much in a session, and then you don't get the benefit of any of that. So that's why, started out with a lot of stuff. When I talked about that one dynamic day that I'd put in, ball slams and sled pushes and all this stuff, trying to do too much. And so really had to scale it back to what was important, and really scale it back to, the lifts that I thought were going to be the biggest bang for the buck, essentially that 80-20 rule of, strength and conditioning, then pair that up with, some auxiliary exercise that, gives them some autonomy in the weight, right? So not everything, because, again, I think I tried to do that too. Like everything's at a certain percentage. You can't do that. It's overwhelming. So I guess that was kind of one of the bigger lessons that I learned was trying to keep it simple but effective. So, and then always evaluating if I do change something, am I changing it to benefit the athlete, or am I changing it to benefit my own creative side that I want to express as a strength coach, right? I mean, right? You're
Yeah,
always
yeah, yeah.
trying to have, your laboratory and, having, a bunch of, athletes to trial and error with
Yeah.
can be fun, but at some point, right, I got to be responsible to give them the tried and true method, but then also like allow, 4 weeks maybe to, try something different or try a new program or try, a new implement, a new exercise, something with that.
You haven't mentioned sandbags. No sandbags in your weight room, or did you try them, and it was a disaster?
Yeah, I had them. I brought in, that was one of those implements that I was looking forward to, again, being part of my son's being a part of the wrestling program. I thought that would be awesome for wrestlers. But it didn't work out well. They didn't love the sandbags like me and some of the fire crews I worked with, that love-hate relationship with sandbags. But no, it wasn't. Plus, I can't imagine running through that many people with the sandbags and then having that right mix of what's going to be the appropriate weight and trying to clean them up and keep them sanitary.
Yes, yeah. Any any piece of equipment, other piece of equipment that, well, I guess put it in another way. You ever find yourself being righteous about something and being proven wrong? So, for example, righteous in the sense this is going to be awesome and it isn't, or righteous in the sense this will never work, and you end up trying it and it turns out to work. Any examples of either of those that come to mind in working with high school athletes?
I think I really love front squats. I really love front squats with youth athletes, because I think it self-corrects to a certain degree. Right? You can start them with goblet squats, holding it, an implement, and it keeps their back upright. They're not going to lean over. It just kind of, the human body self-corrects, and you can. So working with that on with the athletes, trying to get them to learn the front squat and appreciate it. So I would program everything front squat, but I also would never let them do like the cross, holding the barbell like that, because
Bodybuilder side, right? Yeah.
right. So I'd want them to work on their wrist flexibility, and I was probably a little bit too righteous about making everyone all the time do that. You quickly learn with high school athletes that if you let one athlete do one thing, a little bit differently, then they all want to do it differently just because. So, but I'd work with that, and I really love the front squats, but they'd really want to do back squats, and I try to keep the front squats, but I can't argue with how much superior the back squat is in gaining weight and size than the front squat. So I was proven wrong on that one.
We did a King of Exercises test. We tested the back squat, thruster, and deadlift. And I think before the mini study, all the athletes did a 1RM for each of those lifts. And then at the end of the study, they did 1RM for each of those lifts. And by far, in between the 1RMs, the back squat guys just back squatted, the thruster guy just thrusted, and the deadlift guys. And yeah, the back squat is the king of lifts. Yeah, it was no contest. There was no contest.
So I think really giving up your sovereignty to that. I love the front squats and everything that it provided, but I also understood that, hey, back squats need to be in there. Back squats need to be in there, and I just need to be a better coach, have better cues, better eyes on, teach them a little bit better. But we'll still have our front squats and our front rack with our power cleans and things like that. So it's not like you abandon them. You understand the purpose, and that's where I start teaching them with our 2-week onboarding program from the transition from 8th grade to freshman year.
Tell me about that transition program. I've always wondered, is the sport, the Mike Boyles of the world, those from, I don't know what you'd call that. The excess performance. Yeah. You can't give them a barbell or dumbbell until they can have a perfect squat. Like, oh my God, if that's the case for me, I would have never got to a barbell. So I just start them on barbells and just go light. But you do have a transition period. And so you obviously maybe learned that the hard way or just smarter than I am. What is that transition period? What does it look like?
Well, so we were able to do a couple things. So, and it's all been evolutionary and trial and error and different things. And it started with, the CrossFit gym, like you'd bring in people and try to just kind of, hey, jump into the session and I'll teach you as you go. Just because you weren't overloaded with a ton of athletes, at least at our gym we weren't. So we could do that. But then the more athletes you got, you realize that, you need to, before they're released into the population, the general population, you got to be able to, create that environment, and it's more instructional, and you got to make sure they're at a certain level before they can hop in. And that's tenfold when you're dealing with youth athletes, especially, transitioning from 8th grade to freshman year. So the first time we can have contact with the athletes in Colorado is right after, I think it's the last week in May of their 8th grade year. So then we'll put on a 2-week beginners lifting session where we start introducing them to the basic lifts. And you'll love this. The reason, how I start teaching them is, well, we start with, the air movements like air squats and things like that. But we quickly transition to the barbell complex. And we do have the luxury of having some different weighted bars. So we do have like the 15-pound training bars. We do have the, 20 kilo bar, the 25 kilo bar. 15 and 20 kilos. So we build up to those things, but, constantly teaching just those movements, for 2 weeks, and then, adding some weight and, teaching the hang power clean, teaching some of the back positioning. And that's been extremely helpful. Now, does it solve the world's problem? No, because, there's always 10% of the athletes in those 2 weeks that just don't get it. And there's also, probably about 15% of the athletes that, are very advanced that, are kind of bored with it, but you have them help coach the other kids if they can. But usually you have a group of about, 40 athletes that you're bringing in on that. And that's a lot of athletes when you're teaching them, this is a barbell. Like, this is where you put your hands, this is how you set
like
your back.
Three athletes per barbell or 4 athletes per barbell?
Yeah, we're trying to do 3, depending on, we don't have, 12, 15-pound barbells. So we try to position them each, and even that, you lay out all the barbells. It's almost like a tool lab, like where you lay out all your stuff. You're like, okay, this is a 45-pound barbell. This is a, then you go through all your implements. This is, the orientation of the weight room. These are dumbbells. This is what we refer to as the rack. So it's, very foundational. And I think it provides, that good introductory to high school lifting and gives them the confidence to know that they're being taught a certain.
I remember this one time we were coaching, and we had this one kid come in. He was, I don't know, either a new lifter or just a new kid. I don't know if this kid had ever done anything physical in his life, but he couldn't. He walked, and you just like, oh my God. and at the time I had an assistant coach in there, and he wanted to take the kid, I think he did take the kid aside, just tried to teach him to do a goblet squat, and he was just struggling. And I said, just leave him alone, he'll figure it out. And sure enough, in a couple sessions, the kid was almost normal. You ever had just a kid walk in there and you're like, oh my God. And then just, how'd you handle that? Or, would you just throw him to the wolves like I did, or how did you handle it?
No, we have a couple more coaches during those sessions. So like during a normal session, it can be just me and I'm comfortable training, 60 kids or whatever after they've been training for a little while. With those, we try to bring in the sport coaches to keep an eye on it. And the sport coaches know a little bit. They're not as passionate about some of the details as I am, when it comes to the weight room stuff. But I can then go, hey, would you work with, Johnny and just help him keep his heels on the ground and his chest up, and let's just work that and start, and they'll pull them aside and work that. But for the most part, I'd say 30% of them fall into that category where they're lost. And as long as, again, try not to overcoach it from the beginning, right? Give them the instruction, but keep the weight light enough where I know they're not going to hurt themselves, and they're just going to kind of intuitively figure it out with the cues, not on your toes, on your heels. Come on, chest up, different things that they would respond to. So, and then if I have a group that's just, we have the ability to slow down, I go, hey, I'd like to be here by the end of the week. I'd love to be able to get you the barbells and start putting weight on, but we have to get through these kind of milestones in my mind first.
Any conflict with the sport team coaches coming in and getting in the weight room telling you that you're messing something else, or they wanted you to do some exercise or anything like that?
Yeah, initially, especially with some of the, and that's pretty normal. Like it is tough for a sport coach, especially at the high school level, to be able to just hand over, hey, I've been working with these athletes all year. Yeah, why don't you just take over their strength and conditioning? No, that's a very hard thing to do. So there was some compromise early on. Some of them would have found a program online that they really liked, and it was app based, and it worked for them. And I'm like, well, that's great. Let me see how they do. But I will say, more likely than not, when I finally then got into see how the athletes were training and their form on stuff, just from being self-taught by an app, that had demos and all that stuff, they weren't up to speed. There's no substitute for having someone that can coach and has that critical eye and is used to correcting different things on the foundational lifts. I think it's so valuable then to set them up for success as a young athlete, but then also when they have the confidence when they're an adult to be able to go to a gym and do the basic exercise with good form and feel like they've been taught the appropriate way.
Is there any team that you've played on the football side and you just noticed a level of fitness and strength of athletes where you reached out to that strength coach and said, what the hell are you doing? how are you building these monsters?
No, not
or
that I've
are
noticed.
they doing that to you, reaching out to you and finding out?
Yeah, that was, I was about to say that because that was one of the best compliments we got this year. We just did kind of like a 7-on-7 off-season program against another team that, we're 5A team, and had the other coach come up to one of our coaches and goes, man, what are you guys doing with these kids? They just look like they're putting in the work. And we're like, all right. But you also understand with high school athletics, there are just some natural athletes, that come in there and,
classes roll through too, and you get lucky with a class or two. Yeah,
absolutely. And you just hope that sometimes your best athlete is also your hardest worker in the weight room, right? So
that's rare.
It is, but there's some times where it's like, so the kids can see, well, of course he's the best athlete on the field because he's the hardest worker in the weight room. Now, we've had the luxury of having that a couple times, especially the first couple of years that I started, the all-state kids were also just animals in the weight room. And it was awesome to have that. But then, there's also been periods where that's not the case. But, you try to focus in on, what they can control. And that's why I think being able to have those progressions and leaderboards and some of those things and be able to see them actively getting better, that's contagious. Yeah, okay, well, what did so-and-so get? And one of the things that we'll go like the max total and put, the top of, each lift on the board. And I always think of you when I do the relative strength, because we'll also do, a top relative strength. So it's all their totals divided by their body weight. And
right. Yeah.
That's always an
That's
awesome
the score
thing to
right
see.
there. Yeah. Kind of equalizes it. Good. I want to transition now to, I guess, before we move on to firefighter stuff. Any any questions about your experience or knowledge in high school strength conditioning that I should have asked, but I didn't? Any question I should have asked?
Covered a lot of this stuff. The big thing I just, again, just to reiterate, and you probably get this from our conversation, is you have to be extremely flexible when you're dealing with high school athletes, especially when a large number of them. You're going to have to evaluate the efficiency and effectiveness of everything you program, and compare that to the time that you have with them. Like there's always something bigger and better, some latest and greatest that you'd like to try. But as an athlete or as a strength coach with a large number of athletes and, smaller amount of resources, you got to be able to distill that down to what's going to be most effective for the time that you have with the athletes and build them up the safest way possible and something that is transferable to the field. Because if it's not going to be transferable to the field, then what are you doing as a sport coach, or being able to adjust that? So, and it's hard to evaluate that sometimes because there's so much that goes into it. But hopefully we've talked about that, and I think we have.
You like play loud music, or are you a screamer in the weight room, or are you play nasty country music or anything like that, or what's going on in the atmosphere?
Again, this is one of those things where I had to give control to someone else, because at first I took the approach like I had in my private gym training people. It'd be my music. I was in charge of it. I was the DJ, so to speak, and we're going to listen to what I liked. But the high school athlete, they are very in tuned and motivated to their own music. So I'd put that everyone gets a turn, or someone decides on someone that's going to be our DJ, and I think it helps the athletes. I'm in that atmosphere.
Got it. Let's transition over to firefighting, and just so you know, listeners know, Dave is a assistant chief now at Denver Fire Department. 19 years, 18 years in the department, Dave?
Yep, 19 years.
And he also has a Ph.D. in performance psychology. But I want to talk strength conditioning now. And I don't know if I want to get so much into the fitness culture there overall at the department. I know that's a struggle with everybody, but just tell me from a strength and conditioning perspective, what are some of the things you tried with firefighter? What are some lessons learned that you had either working with yourself or working with your crews? You're a captain, you had your own station. Some of those things that stand out.
Yeah, it's definitely a unique population, right? Because I was able to be a strength coach in the military, be a strength coach. I was a graduate assistant at West Point as a strength coach. So I got to see that perspective, and then be able to take that then to the Army. And I was able to see pre-9/11 Army, which is very different than post 9/11 Army. So I got to be able to see both of them, because before, we didn't take our PT too seriously. I mean, we did our push-ups, sit-ups, and then, us meatheads after work, we'd go, hit the gym and do the things that we always like to do. But we didn't do it for our jobs. And then once we got deployed a couple times, once people started realizing that, the body is, going to be responsible for, your safety and those of your team and your crew and your company, they definitely were able to pour in more resources. And we were part of that, right? They reached out to us to be able to coach them up and learn what programming looks like and take that seriously. Now, I still think that the fire department is, and probably always will be, in that pre-9/11 Army atmosphere, but it's getting better. And part of the reason I think that that's the case is doing shift work isn't conducive to then everyone being on the same page of fitness and being in a routine. And we tried to do that. I was part of some great crews that we were all in, and we'd all be doing it at the station. But what you can't control is the days off, right? You put in a 24-hour shift and everyone's on the same page. And then we try to be on the same page during our 2 days off, but everyone has different access to different stuff, and all these other realities set in, and it's really hard to be on the same page. So that was a tough reality to understand and try to program for. Even though I try to accommodate some things like that, never found, a good way. And it's just the reality of that lifestyle. Another thing with fire department personnel especially when you look at what you can control and what you can't, is you have to be ready at a moment's notice. So we've done it a couple times where there's going to be a big workout and be like, ask the chief, ask our battalion chief if we can go out of service for an hour. But I've traditionally worked at busy places, and a lot of times I was selfish like that, but then I realized some other company had to pick up our slack. And you never want to miss the big calls, and so you always have to be ready to respond, when you, at the stations I've worked with is, a higher call volume. So we constantly be getting interrupted with our workouts and things like that. And it's really hard to control. Crews that I've worked with have been awesome in the sense that sometimes it's like, I don't care what it takes. We're just going to get through this workout. But that's also not for everybody. Not everyone has that same mentality. So being able to stay operationally ready to respond and being effective, and then understand that 1 out of 3 days, and then you throw in vacations, trades, all these other things that, they're going to be doing more outside of the job than they are going to be doing on the job. And then being able to assess the tempo of what you have every day to do. You have certain maintenance, training, all these things, and it doesn't seem like you do the math, like you can squeeze out an hour there, right? But when you're dealing with some of the tempos of some of the things, it makes it a little bit more difficult. So those have been some of the, I guess, frustrations that you try to work around, because even with the high school, there's certain things that you have, but hey, you still have an hour, and you still have them, 4 days a week out of 5, which you can get a lot done, and with the fire side, it's a little bit more difficult.
And I gave this question ahead of time, but what would be in your perfect world, your ideal all around fitness assessment for an urban firefighter?
Okay, so I wish I could tell you something like operator ugly, that's because I love that assessment. But I think the fire department has evolved slowly, right? It's like geological leisure a little bit, but I like the assessment that we have right now. And it came from Fairfax County, and you do it in gear, and it's an incumbent test that you do every year. And it's been vetted through some of the, the legalities of this and that. And it's the work performance evaluation. And there's nuance to everyone who adopts it, but basically it's a skill set of, different things that you do in gear. And so you have 10 minutes and 47 seconds to complete it, and you're in gear, you have your pack, and you progress it so you're on air. It takes, and I knew you don't want the specifics, so I didn't want it to get out. So it is, you're doing a ladder carry, you're doing forcible entry, you're doing step ups with the hose pack, and you're advancing a hand line, you are pulling a hand line, you are doing a pike pull, a pole evolution. You're doing that. It's called a ventilation prop. I don't know if you've seen those. It's on some of the combat challenges where you're swinging a hammer through your legs and having a device move with it. And then, you have a victim drag, and you're doing all that. It's one of those ones where it's like, at first you're like, well, that kind of seems, there's nothing glamorous about that. But then you do it and you try to work through it at a briskful pace. You can't run. Every time I take it and I push myself, I'm like, that's a good test. It's a good test. It's a good baseline.
Are you on air for it?
There's different ways that departments implement it. And we had a 7-year program where we were going to implement it at a different, at first it's just going to be familiarization, and it's going to be, everything's going to be non-punitive. And then it's going to be with no air pack on, and then you're going to transition to having an air pack on, and then you're going to have a face piece on, but no forced air on, and then you're going to transition to, doing it on air, and then it's going to be punitive. But we're still in that, phase where it's not mandatory to do it on air. So we're working towards it, but we've had some roadblocks, with it. I mean, we've had people get, hurt. We've had, really some members, develop, acute conditions right after it, cardiac conditions right after it. So we've worked through some things with it, but it being a good test to create that baseline. So knowing that the entire job, 1,100 people, or I forget what the number in operation is, if you can do that every year, you're doing pretty good.
Is it currently a high jeopardy test that's punitive, or is it still you got to take it and there's no punishment if you fail it?
Yeah, it's still not punitive. Honestly, I'm not sure if it ever will be, but just the fact that we can go out there and take that test every year is
It is required, though.
It is required.
Yeah.
So, but at the different levels. So you can go there and take it, with your not on air, which is different, right? It's a different dynamic when you're doing it like that. But again, it is a requirement to go out there and perform it. And, what I like about the evolution of how we've done it on our department is we're looking at it, as a complement to, and I know we've had this conversation before, just because you're fit doesn't mean you're healthy, right? And just because you're healthy doesn't mean you're fit. So I think we've taken this collaborative approach where we've been able to try to do both of those things. So we'll also have a MET test that's done just in shorts and t-shirt, and they'll evaluate your METs. And
MET test is like metabolic conditioning, or
yes, so trying
step
to
up test. Go ahead.
Yep. So you're on a treadmill and you're trying to get that 12 MET equivalent of work. And if you can get to that, it's a measure every year that you're able to do. So again, non-punitive, but trying to get that benchmark of 12 METs to be able to show that this is a high work output. Now, that's been one of those things that in the last year at entry level, they've required that. So it's not just the CPAT, which is the standard entry level physical aptitude test for firefighters. Now they're going additional and saying, well, you got to be able to, meet that 12 MET requirement to, be part of the program, which I think, both of those together show one, a physical preparedness, but also someone that's used to doing work regardless of, what their training was beforehand. So it means you have experience doing work, and then you've demonstrated that you can complete a, basic entry-level CPAT evaluation too. So those together, I think, provide a pretty good foundation, that passes all the requirements of being legal and falling, with the vetted process.
Is there with the current test, even though it's not punitive, is it just a raw score given, or is there a pass fail based on the different levels? Are the scores public? In other words, you take the score, can everybody else in the department see how, or take the test, see how you scored?
No, you can't. But, like, again, for the people that, there's a group that, love to try to race through it, and everyone kind of tells each other their times, and, you
Got
try
it,
to,
yeah.
you try to validate those, and that's not the point of the test, but it is something where, like, hey, that's cool. So-and-so did it in, 7 minutes and 30 seconds or whatever it is. And you're like, okay, but next year I'm going to do it in this or whatever. But I think it's very useful. It is part of the, I think, progression to have something that you do annually. Now, will it ever get up to, the requirements that you're talking about? I'm not sure. I don't think so. But just the fact that we've been able to weather a couple storms and still have it says a lot.
I know you were on the forefront there, Denver. Does every station have at least standardized equipment right now?
No.
Or is it still hodgepodge?
It's still a hodgepodge, but it's getting to be, it's and the reason for that is because it's on the members of the station to adjust it. Like, hey, you get a certain allowance per year, but that can be either spent for tools, not tools on the fire rig, but tools around the station, or things to better the atmosphere, and it's up to the vote of the members in that station, and it's always on the board for vote, better equipment. But there's only so much you can buy. We'd love to all have like a Versa climber in there or something. A rack with some bumper plates and space, and space is a big part of it. Some of them are closets, and you have to take the rigs out to get a pretty good workout in if you wanted to. And people get creative, though. It's really cool to see how people go above and beyond to get their fitness in.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a difficult question. I'm going to try to not let you get out of answering it, even though you're assistant chief now. Have you ever worked with a firefighter who was an exceptional firefighter but was deconditioned?
No, I don't think so. Now, were they the fittest person on the rig? No, absolutely not. But sometimes I find, again, I haven't done the studies on this, but just passing the eye test, that sometimes the person that looks the most fit isn't your best firefighter.
Got it. Yeah, it definitely doesn't go the other way. We once asked that question just to everybody on the email list. It was a leadership question. If you could respect a leader in a tactical profession who wasn't fit, and most of the answers were no. But there were notable exceptions, or people saying, "Hey, this guy was not very fit, but he was a tactical fucking genius. He knew what the hell he was doing, and he kept us alive. All right, let's talk about just general strength stuff. Most influential books. Strength and conditioning.
Strength and conditioning. When I saw that, I realized that I need to be
Read
more
some books.
contemporary. Well, no, I need to be more contemporary in the strength and conditioning world. And because I always go back to Dan John's Never Let Go. That was always one that stuck out to me because, it mirrored a lot of the stuff that you taught. But the one thing I always thought about his writing and his approach to things were, at first the knock on him was he wasn't very detailed, in the sense where it almost seemed like, oh yeah, let's just do 20 by 20 today or something like that. But then after, working in some of the environments that he'd been in, now I can kind of see where he keeps it simple for a reason. And then that book in particular is a great one to hand to anyone that's interested in learning more about training. And I just found it, very, very well written, and he's able to take some complex ideas and get it down to my level.
Yeah, most influential coaches.
Well, it's not just because I'm on this podcast with you, but absolutely you. I've been to a ton of, even before I met you, go to all these NSCA events, get my CSCS, get my TSAC, all these things, even talk with all coaches around. And what you want to learn is programming. I want to learn about programming. And everyone would give you these generalities and go, well, this or that. And I remember going to one NSCA event, and I really put the speaker on the spot of like, oh yeah, but how do you do that? Like, how does this look like? And he's like, well, that's proprietary information, and I'm not going to give you my secrets. And I'm like, well, then why am I here? Why am I here? Just to get my CEUs? But you were definitely the most influential on that side, to be able to walk us through fluid periodization, programming for different events, being able to look at what's effective, what's efficient, why are you doing things, and being able to progress it in a certain way depending on what your goal is, whether it's athletes, whether it's military, whether it's event focused, and being able to, adjust that in a cyclical fashion, right, that we all learned as beginner strength coaches, but actually put a plan together that was effective. So, yeah, I didn't see you blush too much, though.
Anybody else? There has to be somebody else. I mean, maybe not in general, but like there's some coaches I learned stuff from. Like from Mark Twight, he answered a question: why would a mountain athlete want to train in the gym? From Louis Simmons, he kind of got back to the idea of, it's okay to go heavy every day. It's kind of the TLU programming, and it's part of the culture of the gym, and it's good. And also the question, fancy exercises with his, his concerns about power cleans. We've spoken about that. For those who don't know, Louis Simmons doesn't like power cleans. He just says do jump squats. So, and Vern Mangueta, I learned from his book how, this is basics of work capacity programming or progression. You haven't seen it. There's no work capacity progression in CrossFit WODs, right? There's no progression. It's all random. Any nuggets like that you had already mentioned? Dan John, and it sounds like I haven't read that book of his, for some reason. Gonna for sure. Any other like just nuggets that come to mind for you from other coaches?
There's some that, I still go to all the, the lectures and stuff, and I pick up little things here with, maybe a piece of equipment or an exercise, or, one of the big things was, talking with another high school coach about, how he keeps, the structure of his weight room. And he led me to that rack coach program that we were able to implement. And that was huge. That was one thing where if I was on shift, I could leave that with, the other coaches, and they just hit play. And so then the athletes were able to, follow that through. And that was a big deal, even though we don't have the iPads like you'd see at the local university where they have, some pretty incredible stuff. You could still, again, be effective programming on a time basis with those things and still be able to adjust it, right? Because in the old, you give people their folder or give people, their printout with their numbers and different things, but then it would change at certain times, right? And then trying to keep them within the time constraints of work.
Right. I haven't heard of that. I'll have to look it up. Is that for high school coaches, probably?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, got it. Goddamn technology.
Well, you'd love to, be able to use some more of the technology that's out there, and I'm sure they will within time. Because when you talk about, some of the things are coming down in cost, when you're talking about, just electronic timers, force plates, the velocity measurement type of things, it's all coming down in price. And you'd be in. I hope there's a time where that we can have that in the high school weight room, and be able to measure the speed that you're doing your squat with, and really be able to know what that number looks like, rather than, well, I got it up and down, check the block on that one. Well, let's talk about our timing and being able to
Yeah,
program
yeah.
that a little bit more effectively.
That that velocity training, I know I've been kind of following that. I think we're going to do a mini study on it. Although my understanding, the application of that isn't necessarily to use it for progression, but if the barbell isn't moving fast enough, the athlete's tired, you need to pull them off the lift. Other than that, I'm not seeing it, but I could be mistaken. I remember there was a book written by a coach who was at the Air Force Academy, and he did something similar, but just in reps. He would say, I want you to do, like, say it's a dumbbell hang squat clean. He loved dumbbells. And you need to do 6 dumbbell hang squat cleans in 15 seconds. And if you get 7, add weight. If you get 5, drop weight. But that was a way that he kind of, did the velocity of the barbell moving and was able to progress it.
Yeah, that
So
was
it's just
Alan.
an,
Yeah, that was Alan
go ahead.
Hendrick. Yeah, Alan
Yeah, Alan
Hendrick
Hendrick.
loved
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
He loved
yeah,
the dumbbell training. He loved like the split snatch with some of those things. And, he actually had the entire Air Force Academy weight room filled with these dynamic dumbbells at a time, like that had water in them, kind of like the old water log, but he'd have them to be able to have introduce that variability, in stabilization. So yeah, I mean, it was definitely cool. But then also, going around with my son and the recruiting, trail, and seeing what some of these, universities have now. But you're exactly right. You do a certain amount of your reps, and if you're not meeting that number, well, either you need to pick it up, or there's something else, because we'll dive into your, the sleep time. But before then, you kind of take a survey, and you do a self-assessment on how you feel that day. And I don't know about
yeah.
all that stuff. It's an excuse to
So
not.
you're sports performance PhD. That's your bread and butter, man.
Well, right, but there's also trapdoors with that, right? So you telling someone just because you didn't get enough sleep that, oh, it's okay, you're not working hard enough. Well, no, no, there comes a time where you need to put in the work, regardless of how much sleep you had, and there'll be
Yeah,
some
yeah,
adjustments in that. But, I love the force measurements, because I think it adds, especially to sport, that mindset of being able to move things quickly,
all the time.
right? And with a load, when we talk about, I know one of the questions you had asked me before, hey, do you guys do a lot of fitness training in your turnout gear? Well, no. We've done it a couple times. We've done it, I've experimented with that, but, I never really have seen the results of that. We'll go do firefighter training in our gear on air, and that's right. That's extremely important, to be able to do that, because then you feel the weight, you feel the limitations, you feel how cumbersome everything is. But, I never felt the need or saw the benefit to doing like gym training essentially in my turnout gear. It's like, I don't have the kids in the high school put on their pads and helmet and go do back squats or anything with a dumbbell. No, we do that
Yeah,
stuff, because we want to be able to provide a safe environment to work through full range of motion, to be able to develop those things fully, and then, be able to create that positive adaptation when you're in your gear, then being able to, have the more horsepower, have the more endurance, but now you're under the constraints of limited range of motion, lack of mobility, and maybe your shoulders or different things where your body's in a different position. But you've done your training in your gear beforehand, so now you can accommodate for the extra amount of heat that you have to deal with in your body temperature and adjust from there. So those are some of the things that I've found with, how realistic do you make your training in the gym? Well, it depends how much training you're doing, outside of the gym for your specific sport or your specific occupation.
yeah. I've seen an application, especially on the mountainside, where, and I think I learned this from Dwight too. He's like, it's very inefficient to train fitness on the mountain. You just can't control the environment, and it could be, say you want to go do vertical climbing and it's rainy and muddy that day and you slip all over the place, right? He says it is, and it's also often inefficient to try to train technique in the gym So I was always on the mountainside, especially really careful. The best example is like doing Boso ball squats for skiers. At some point, just makes you good at doing Boso ball squats. I don't know if it's going to transfer to talents on a ski. I do know that getting their legs stronger, eccentric strength is going to help. So we'll just focus on
Absolutely.
that. So that's interesting. Have you, but this is a question I have for you in terms of air management and extending how long you can be on air. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's part fitness, part managing adrenaline, part just experience, not going too hard so you don't burn through your air. Have you ever done any programming to kind of test those different ideas, breathing techniques, or anything like that?
We've done some things where, for like every year we do, how long does it take you to drain a bottle, depending on your activity level. If we constantly do our step ups, right? That would be one thing, exception that we do. We do step ups.
Yeah.
With our gear, or go do that on air, especially in the urban environment and downtown, you do. That's the one thing we do in our gear. We'll go climb stairs. There's nothing to replicate that. Even step ups don't replicate, just the constant movement forward and, in a, stairwell. But we have done some of those things and managed our air. And from actually putting work into it and measuring our time to just sitting in a corner in survival mode, right? Being able to take as little breath as possible to still then keep you from surviving, if you will, for someone to come help rescue you and whatnot. Now, the different things we found, and for me as well, is the bigger you are, the shorter that air tank is going to last. And that's just
doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter, and I feel bad because I was usually, I never want to be the weakest link, but I've also found that, I'm usually one of the bigger guys on the rig, and, I'm going to take more air to move me around than, some of the other guys that are more efficient. And yeah, I can adjust that. I can adjust that through my fitness level, but I can also, adjust that through, just, hey, how much lean mass do I have on my body, or how much mass am I taking up? So there's certain adjustments that you can do with that.
Let's see. All right, let's go to lightning round questions. What's the best total body lift?
I like power clean and push press.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Or sometimes we've also done the hang clean into a thruster.
Yeah.
So you fire out of the bottom. That's kind of, especially for the high school athletes, very effective, but also a high learning curve.
I always found the hang squat clean easier to teach than the power clean.
Absolutely.
And the hang power clean. Same for you, really?
Well, power from the hang position, absolutely a lot easier to
clean. Yeah, so the hang squat clean easier than... Good, it's not just me. Your best lower body exercise?
Like I said,
lower body press. Lower body press. Go ahead.
Lower body press?
Yeah, lower body press. So like a squat versus a deadlift. Like I'd call a deadlift a lower body pull.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, I love the front squat, but I can't argue the effectiveness of the back squat.
Got it. Best lower body pull exercise?
Hinge lift. Barbell hinge lift.
Best upper body press?
Bench press.
How close did you let your oldest son get to you in 1RM bench press? Is he anywhere near you right now?
He's close. I don't think my absolute PR he'll ever get just because I'm bigger, but he's pretty darn close. I think he has me probably right now. Pretty darn close. Well, no, it's wrestling season. I got him.
Don't ever do it next to him and let him prove it. Best upper body pull exercise?
Pull-ups.
I see. The most overrated exercise or lift?
Well, there's a lot of circus tricks out there, right? The one probably like handstand walks, and anything that falls into that category. Anything you have to do on your hands and you're inverted.
Yeah, and those CrossFit guys started kipping their handstand push-ups.
Oh, yeah. Yep. And I'm like, do I say, is it because I'm not good at it that I don't like it? Or
I know. That's part of it.
Right.
Most underrated exercise or lift?
I think we talked about a couple of these. One, we spoke about the neck training. I think that's definitely underutilized. The Nordic hamstring curls, again, underrated. But one that we hadn't talked about is overhead squat. So as a core lift, not going heavy, which I've made the mistake of. We've done a lot of dumb things like going as heavy as we could on an overhead squat. I always found that to be a very solid movement, if you're trained. Definitely not for those that are untrained.
You ever experimented with Dan John's The Exercise?
Oh, yeah. Love that one.
I love that too.
Right? And what's
my shoulder's so messed up, I haven't been able to do that for 15 years.
Right? And if I remember right, wasn't that based off some of his high school athletes, if you have time to just do one thing, what is it going to be? Well, here's the exercise.
I can't remember if he told me this directly or I read it somewhere, but yeah, like some kid came to him and said, I want to, like a fullback. I want to, be the stud next year. So all he had him do was like the exercise. So hang squat snatch plus an overhead squat. So two in a row. See, the most overrated piece of exercise equipment.
I think we all kind of had our play with this one, but the Atlas stones.
Really?
Yeah,
I don't know. Go ahead.
They were cool for a minute, and then we find ourselves not being able to use them, or just taking up space. It wouldn't be something that you program effectively. So it was one of those novelties that quickly wore off.
I just purchased for myself like a sandbag Atlas stone.
Is it variable weight?
Yeah, you can just feel. I mean, I think it loaded. It's like 150 pounds. It was too heavy for me. I thought it was, no problem. So, I took some weight out. It's about 100 pounds now, but it's getting that thing from the ground to my shoulder. I mean, I remember in the gym one time we had a 100-pound sandbag, and we could do like one rep each side and we were smoked. It's amazing how much heavier the 100-pound sandbag is than an 80. I think at the most, I got like 76, 80-pound sandbag get-ups in 10 minutes, which is good for my size.
That's moving.
If there was some kid 10 years younger than me always beat me, but yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to see if I come back to that.
But that's definitely not, Atlas stone is very different than a sandbag, right? Sandbag's one of those ones I love. Atlas stone is like, you got to make the molds, you got to order the molds, you got to
too much work
for, and you don't know. You're guessing, hey, am I going to be okay with a 90? Am I going to be okay with this? And you don't know.
Yeah, now they just make sandbag looks, it's like a cylinder. The more weight, the bigger the cylinder. Yeah, it's a serious, I don't know, I'll see, but we might implement it. I wonder what my answer to that would be. It might be kettlebells. Could be because I suck at them. I'm doing a bunch of high rep kettlebell snatches now. I made the mistake one time watching them kettlebell sport guys and watching these women do like 10 minutes clean and jerk the kettlebell at 54 or 24 kilograms. And then I got a barbell 65 pounds and like in 5 minutes was smoked. I'm like, oh my God, these guys are monsters. What's your best exercise?
Bench press.
Lift your exercise you suck at.
A prize snatch. Never had the mobility for it.
One that wasn't on the list. What's your dream strength and conditioning job? Strength and conditioning coach job?
Honestly, I feel like I have it right now.
Except the one you have. Sorry.
I'd love to be a dream. Well, if I had to say it now, it would be a part of the strength program at the Air Force Academy.
Yeah, I've never coached high school athletes. I think that might be the most fun. I've been in a couple weight rooms. I wasn't too impressed with them, but talk about motivated athletes, right? And high level.
Well, to a certain degree, but then it also the frustration on the other end of it. And that's really what got me really to dive deep in the mental performance stuff is, and again, we're both parents and we both have kids and we've interacted with youth athletes that, if you could just get them to show up every day and put in the work, they'd be able to maximize their potential. But something happens where they don't, right? They make accommodations to themselves and you see the potential and you hope to be able to help them with guidance, coaching, and, even environmental design to a certain degree. Like we were talking about even, small change, like having control of the music in the weight room. But that's also the frustrating part of, dealing with high school athletes is you see the untapped potential that you try to persistently see some behavioral change by certain things that you can control, right? And, it happens for some of them, but not all of them. You want to be able to cast a bigger net to be able to take more of them in that positive way to see the benefits of hard work and sport, not just the X's and O's, so when you see that potential not put to work, then it can be disheartened for that. So that would be the only downside of that.
Yeah. Thank you, David.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate you. You take care. Good luck to your son and kind of following you over, all social media. You guys are rocking.
I appreciate it, Rob. Don't be a stranger.
All right. Take care. We'll talk to you later.
Take care.
I don't know if you can still hear me. It's spinning on my side. Hey, Dave, I don't know if I lost service here or not, but hopefully I didn't. Yeah, I was just going to hit stop record, and then looks like it started again. Hey, thanks so much for that. Appreciate you so much. That's awesome. Fun, huh? Yeah. What What's it looking like for you career wise? How many more years you got for retirement? You gonna go for the big job? What are you gonna do? You know yet? Do you have to wait 10 years to retire? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's, I guess that'd be right. I mean, is your wife still at University of Colorado? Good. Is she? Was she must be a colonel by now, huh? Oh, she did. Okay. Yeah. My oldest is he's Washington State, a little bit north of Portland. There, he's working towards become an electrician. Tried to college, didn't work out for him. My younger has been working at for the county in Jackson, Wyoming, there for about 8 years now, and he's actually just coming. He's going to come start for me here in a couple of weeks, strength coaching. So pretty excited about that. I've been recruiting him for a while. Is that it? Yeah. So my I got two. Yeah, could be. Yeah, I got two little ones. I got a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old now. So that's awesome. It's actually awesome. Here we got them. They both surf and they're into jujitsu. And I see you got your boys wrestling. I say your daughter. Yeah, your younger daughter. Did your older daughter wrestle too, or just your younger daughter? It's awesome. Yeah, they're. I've got them both into jiu-jitsu. Even my 5-year-old, she wrestled with me every day a couple times, and then got her into jiu-jitsu. I always wanted to wrestle, never did. But did you wrestle in high school? No, I never did. I was just too busy. I mean, they didn't offer in Jackson until a few years before I started moving back and forth. Then I suffered a hip replacement and just haven't got to it. I imagine I can still do it. It's much. I mean, here in Hawaii, it's pretty ridiculous. So I might do it. I'm just I'm working on so much now between this and I picked up this sport called hydrofoiling, so I'm trying to learn that. Yeah. I don't have time for it now, but I might for sure. You still do that? You be working coaching, right? That stuff. You're gonna go back to school? Take me being a county chief, so you'll have here lower participation. Not because there's been any big improvements. Yes, there has been some improvement. Is there one area of life right now that you're most disappointed in yourself in? Because I trained that hard? It gets worse, man. It gets worse.